Hey guys, welcome to the Coaching Corner. This week you have Jess, you have Ryan, and you have Steve. Jess has actually been on the last 3 now you've been on, Jess?
2, I think.
2 in a row. It's been a while since we've seen your face though, Ryan, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate for the audience because this face is beautiful. So yeah.
This face, this voice, it's all there. You've got everything.
The entire package. And I'm smart. Like, it's great.
It's very true. And we need an update now on you, Ryan, because it's been a while. I don't know how much you can divulge to the listeners, but I'm sure they'll be interested to hear. Let's go training, nutrition, life, everything. Where's Ryan at the moment?
Yeah.
Single, married, what's happening?
Definitely single. But starting off with training, I am still very much so just kind of focused on the upper body like a complete bro would be. And it kind of puts me into maybe a interesting situation to where I am mostly just focusing on maintaining my lower half. And if the rate of energy surplus that we need, or the amount of energy surplus that we need, is already pretty low, and then if I'm not training really my lower half for growth, that's kind of putting me in a situation where I'm basically trying to gain at the slowest kind of trackable rate to kind of get things moving in the right direction, which I don't think is a bad thing. But I think that I did just a slight kind of mini cut, and then over the last kind of month or so, I've been working things back up and really haven't gained a whole lot of weight. So it's kind of in that situation where you're trying to gain so slowly to where you can look back over a couple of months and just not have moved the scale a whole lot. So I'm kind of working through that, but my lifts have also gone up and stuff like that. So I think things are still going in the right direction there. So yeah, training wise, focusing on the upper body, nutrition wise, the smallest amount of surplus as possible. And one thing I've recently done with my nutrition in the last few weeks is one thing that I noticed with kind of taking a higher carb and lower fat approach, or putting my fat kind of around the minimum levels and getting the rest through carbs, is that when I would have a meal kind of in the middle of the day, and I train in the morning and kind of have quite a bit of my carbs kind of around my workout. And then when I would train in or have a meal in the middle of the day, I would just get really tired if there was quite a bit of carbs in that meal, and I'd kind of be ready for a nap after that. So I've kind of been playing around with a little bit less carbs and kind of a more moderate fat intake. And I've actually really liked that. So I don't know. I think that you can play around with your carbs and fat ratios like a whole bunch. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this do, but that's something that I noticed that I really like. So that's kind of training and nutrition wise. Life wise, so kind of throughout COVID, I don't know if I mentioned this on a previous podcast, but I was going to give kind of coding and web development a shot there. And I kind of continued to do that. And that has led to some cool opportunities here this spring, which I'm going to wait a little bit to kind of talk about further. But I think that kind of in that area of things, I'll have some more opportunities this spring and hopefully be moving out of my parents' basement here in probably 2 months here, and probably moving quite far away from home, a couple thousand miles. So that is going to be an interesting experience there. So yeah, that's a little life update on me.
Ryan, when you were at not university, what do you call it in the States? Do you call it uni? What do you call it?
College.
Yeah. Were you at home still then as well, or were you on campus?
So I was on campus. So my first few years, my first year I lived in a dorm, and then my next 3 years I lived in a house with 4 other guys. So I was kind of on campus there. So yeah.
You've had some experience of the freedom then. You haven't been just a homebody the whole time.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I also, for my master's degree, I actually had an apartment all to myself. And oh my God, that is like the best thing ever. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. So yeah.
How old are you now, Ryan? I actually have no idea. Like, I know you're like 25, 24.
So I turned 24 1 week ago. So yeah.
I think I moved out at a similar age. It was like 2015. So yeah, I was like 25 when I moved out from home.
And one thing I've started to notice is I think my hairline is starting to come a little bit there, which I I kind of hate my dad's, got the same thing going on. So I think it's my future, but it is what it is.
Are you saying that because you've seen me getting upset about my
Uh,
own?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, at least I'm not quite an old man like you, but it is coming a little bit.
We're looking for, if anyone has, actually please don't send us hair transplant links. I've had so many. It's just really upsetting, actually. Anyway, so that's exciting. And yeah, cool on the nutrition front as well. And it makes sense with the surplus. I know I've done it's kind of almost gaintaining in a sense, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I get frustrated when I have done that for like a couple of months, but I can see why you're taking it steady because you're just probably not growing at the same rate.
Yeah. And I'm okay with the trade-off if my growth over the next few years is like at 70% instead of 100% because I take things a little bit slower during gaining phases. I'm also okay with that trade-off if it means staying just slightly on the leaner end, just, because I like that. So yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. So Jess, what's up on your end? How's things? I guess the last time they heard from you was about a month ago. So has much happened in that last month?
Yeah, still cutting. I'm deloading and I have a refeed coming tomorrow. So I'm happy with that. Training is going great. Still training 6 days a week, upper lower times 3. Just trying to maintain muscle mass right now, finding movements that fit me great. I have a little injury on my left wrist and I still don't know exactly how to fix it, which is frustrating, but we're working around that. No, and life, still living at my grandparents. So I'm still in France and hopefully whenever COVID is starting to slowly going away, I hope to be moving anywhere where it's actually warmer because I cannot deal with the cold anymore. I get very frustrated now when it's snowing or raining or it's just gray and it's not fun anymore. So I'm looking forward to things being somewhat back to normal.
Yeah, I don't know when that's going to be at the moment. I know I'm jealous of Ryan because he's been not locked down at all, and we've been locked down for the majority of what feels like
I almost feel guilty
now.
about it,
I've had some clients saying, they're telling me that US clients I used the leg curl machine, it felt amazing. I almost didn't want to tell you because I felt bad, and I was like, no, it's fine. I'm liking it. I called it. One of them sent me a brochure of his gym and the equipment he has, and I was like, oh, this is hashtag gym porn for me right now.
That's
someone
hilarious.
dieting you, food porn. It's someone who's been left not having the gym for a long time. You're like, oh my gosh, these machines.
Yeah,
just surfing it.
It's definitely a nice situation to be in to where I didn't get locked down from that. I think it was a month or two, which, is definitely a better situation than almost anybody else. So definitely fortunate for sure.
And actually, I think it might be interesting, Jess, to touch on your first phase of fat loss, only because we had some issues, not issues, I guess, but it's just one of those where it's a real life example of why the scale isn't the be all and end all. I don't know if you want to talk through that a little bit. I thought that might be interesting.
Sure. So I started it was supposed to be a mini cut. It was supposed to be a 6 weeks mini cut and then going back to massing for a couple of months before starting prep in April. And the scale wasn't just going down. So we decided to do the diet before the diet. So I'm currently pre-prep. We call it pre-prep diet before the diet. I came back from my mom weighing the same that I left before Christmas holiday. So I didn't gain much during the holidays. And then for 3 weeks in a row, the scale weight was going up and then slightly down and then up again and slightly down. For 3 weeks, we pretty much stalled, which is very typical of my body. And fortunately, we've been through 2 fat loss phases before together. So we know we need to just keep going. But yes, that's just an example of how frustrating it can be. And sometimes you just need to push through it. Definitely a bit of a mind fuck when you just wait for the scale to be dropping and it doesn't. I think it's fairly typical for females when they start a fat loss phase to just stall, unfortunately, due to various reasons. I reintroduced creatine at the start of the diet. I went back to the gym after a 10 days maybe break. and my hormones were all wacky. Like I was waiting for my period that never came. And yeah, after 3 weeks, we finally had like kind of a whoosh. So yeah, 3 weeks. It took me 3 weeks to actually get a nice move on the scale. So if that ever happens to your clients, yourself, it sometimes it's just normal, and you just have to like wait it out, which is very frustrating. And that's when most people will choose to actually push and start to like introduce some cardio or like lower calories. And if you know that you are in a deficit and you're adhering to the deficit, just wait it out. It's going to happen at some point. Like, don't push through now, because you're going to need to push later. And if you start lowering your calories right now, especially if you're like me and you have to diet on like fairly low calories, it's not fun to be moving calories down every single week. But yeah, it's very frustrating. But that's also, I think, the beauty of like fat loss phases get easier over time, but you just have to know your body and actually remember or like write down what works for you and how it's going to go. I know, like we've been together for 3 years. Like we know my body stalls quite easily. We know that I adapt very easily to the deficit, and we also know that the scale isn't always the only thing we need to rely on, because if I look at measurements, like we've taken my waist measurements and it's down already. And even at pictures, like I pose in the morning when I'm fasted, and I notice I'm like significantly leaner in like 6 weeks. So yeah, just don't take the scale weight for like the only measure of progress, because it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. I think that's really well said and really interesting, because I think you hear these snippets probably over on social media where it's like, I don't know, it might be throw away the scale, and listening to that, people might be like, oh yeah, just don't use the scale. Or you hear snippets that's like, oh, if the scale's not coming down, then the person's just not adhering to the diet. Like that's what it is. Like if they're saying they're consuming that much, they're not. If they're not like losing on the scale, it's like, you can definitely look deeper into that. So like for you, we know, like, unless you're just blank face lying to me, like a client might do that, I guess, but it's very difficult when, especially when you've been working with someone for so long and you've got that face-to-face contact that we have with our kind of video check-ins. I mean, it's just, they're just hurting themselves in that case. So when that is happening, you can track it back. Like you talked about the creatine, you talked about like changes in hormones, you talked about kind of how they lay off and then coming back to training. Like these can all contribute to that. And then we're using other markers like the photos, waist measurements to give us like, okay, like this triangulation of all our kind of measurements, what direction are they all shooting in? It's like, oh, actually, if we ignore the scale a little bit, it looks like actually we're in the right direction, which is really cool. So I just think that's nice for the listeners to hear about. I don't know if Ryan, have you seen that a lot? Is it more with females? Have you seen that as well?
I'm not sure if I've noticed a trend with males versus females. I definitely noticed that trend though, to where it's most people just have a non-linear style of dieting. And I would say the far majority of my clients in those first couple of weeks, they do see a significant drop, but every once in a while we do see kind of a plateau there. And I think that when that happens, I'll just kind of ask, what's your kind of food volume looked like? Have you started drinking a whole bunch more kind of artificial sweeteners or piling on food right before bed because you're worried about waking up hungry and stuff like that? And usually when you start digging into a little bit deeper to that, it's like, yeah, I took out all my kind of starchy carbohydrates for vegetables right away, or I started eating a lot more before bed because I was worried about getting hungry and stuff like that. And when you kind of piece those together, then it's like, okay, we probably have a whoosh or a drop coming here as you kind of get used to this different kind of eating schedule and stuff like that. So usually it's just about asking more questions. Now, I would say that every once in a while you have it to where it's like a client is maybe not tracking what they think they're tracking and are having a hard time with that. Like a classic example that a lot of coaches can probably relate to is when you prescribe 40 grams of protein or something like that, and they measure it out as 40 grams of like actual chicken breast or stuff like that. They're like, man, this is easy to hit my protein intake. And I'm like, okay, what are you doing then there? And they can kind of run into those issues. So there are differences, and like every once in a while it is just an honest mistake with tracking or stuff like that. But Usually it could be a result of food volume, or like you mentioned with creatine, starting that up and holding a little bit more water there, or different things like that. And asking some more questions can kind of get you a better idea of what's going on there. I'm lucky personally to where I always see like a really nice drop in those first weeks, and my weight loss tends to be a little bit more linear, but that's definitely not the norm for a lot of clients. And it works on the flip side with weight gain as well, to where it'll be steady for a few weeks and then we'll see like a 2 pound pop, and then it'll be steady and then we'll see a pop. So it definitely can work both ways there.
Yeah, really interesting to hear. And I think the really cool thing you said that, and this is coaching, it's like troubleshooting, asking questions, doing some investigative work, not just looking at the data for the sake of it, trying to gather some context. And sometimes you have to ask those kind of particular questions. And the example you gave there is I've definitely seen it before, where like I'll have someone on like, I don't know, 1,300 calories or something really low, and then they'll be reporting that they're stuffed. And I'm like, that doesn't go together. What's my fitness pal looking like? Can you take some photos of your food or something? You have to like really dig deep. But I think thankfully most of our clients a lot of them are coaches themselves, so they know this stuff. So it makes that whole process much easier. So most people are in like Jess's position, where it's a case of, they're doing their job on their end. It's just the scale isn't playing ball. It can even be down like maybe they've got a new scale, they're weighing on a different scale, or it's changed location. Like all these, there's so many variables that can impact that. So it's good that people, or at least our team, are very educated on that, and we're aware of what can happen there, because that could be the difference between getting to your goal and not, because you make the change that you've said, Jess, which could be completely inappropriate, and then you end up binging or breaking the diet, or you're certainly making your whole job harder. So I know one thing we want to talk about, like the main topic of this podcast, and it probably lines up with it a little bit because we're talking about your prep, Jess, was kind of like a lot of people this time of year, it's the start of the year, shows, particularly this season, seem to be later, particularly around Europe and the UK and things. So they'll be looking at shows and starting prep maybe. And I think some people don't consider kind of the prerequisites almost. And as a coach, obviously we need to be aware of this. And I know this is something you're passionate about. So I don't know if you want to start with, or where you want to start with it, but I'll throw the mic over to you.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where I'm going to be starting that, but yeah, it's definitely important to talk about that, because shows are getting so trendy, like competing is getting trendy in the fitness industry, whether you're natural or not. And most people don't realize what getting yourself into prep actually entails. And it's it's pretty rough, especially if it's your first one. So I would probably deter more people than actually get on board for prep, because I don't think they're ready, or even for just a longer fat loss phase. But for prep, one thing that would be great to mention is having had more than one successful dieting phase previously. I think that's probably one of the biggest one. And making sure that you know the trends of your body, you know how your body works under a deficit, you know how it feels like to actually push a deficit. You don't have any issues with food. You have a good relationship with food. I don't like to call it relationship, but I'm just going to air quote relationship with food. And making sure that you have been training and having have had like enough muscle mass on you, because you have to remember that as much as we want to be shredded on stage, especially with the standards nowadays, especially natural bodybuilding, like you really have to be shredded. Like shredded glutes is just becoming normal nowadays. You want to make sure you're not going to be just skinny, or like very, very, like you can be shredded and have no muscle mass. It's easy to take someone from like 20% body fat to like 5%. Well, I'm giving rough estimations, but like from 20 to 5% body fat through dieting. But if they look like they've never lifted before, when they get on stage, they're not going to be placing. Like you have to show that you have some muscle mass. So I think that's probably the two biggest mistakes that people make when they start prep, or like when coaches screen people for prep. They don't ask them, how many times have you dieted before successfully, and how long have you been training for? Because you're not going to lose, like the goal is not to lose muscle mass, but you're going to lose a little bit of muscle mass, especially as males. But yeah, you want to be looking your best on stage. You don't want to be looking skinny, because anyone can look shredded without any muscle mass, but that's not really the goal when you're actually on stage to display muscle mass.
Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of the Revive Stronger members site. Inside you'll find a thriving forum, a growing exercise library, presentations, research reviews and courses. If you want to get involved, sign up via the description. Yeah, it can be really hard, I think, especially if you're a newer coach. One, you probably haven't got the experience of doing this sort of thing, and also you don't generally want to turn down clients. And so it depends on what type of person you are. But I know for me, I can be a bit of a people pleaser, and I don't like to kind of feel like I'm being mean. So if like someone came to me like, oh yeah, I really want to compete, I can see how when I was younger at the start of my career, I might find it hard to be like, dude, like you need to just keep eating and lifting. Whereas now, like I'd be very upfront, honest about that, because I know that's ultimately the best decision for them. So I'm glad I didn't get too many competitors when I was first starting out, because I might have tried to do something with them because I thought I was helping them and doing the best for them. But like you said there, I think a lot of the time people come to coaches for the experience, for their honest opinion. And so you need to give it to them, and you're only doing them a disservice if you don't give them your honest opinion there. And yeah, I think you can, like some people will still want to go through with it, but as long as you've given them the download of like, I think you're probably not going to be as competitive as you would like to be, you're still happy to go ahead, and they're like, yeah, I just have a dream of getting shredded, then it's a case of, all right, like buckle up and we will get you there, potentially if you're happy to do that. But yeah, the experience is a big one, because I know they, especially, I think this is more so for males, but they're like spend a couple of years bulking. They think they're pretty big. They'll be like 200 pounds. They'll be like, oh yeah, I bet I could shred down like to 180 and I'll be shredded on stage. And it's their first diet. And you're like, man. And they diet to 180 and they're like still like 15% body fat.
Yeah.
And you're like, and they're like, okay. And then normally maybe they give up at that stage. But yeah, I think it could be a bravado type of thing where they just think they're bigger than they are. What else, apart from a couple of dieting phases under their belt, sufficient muscle mass, Ryan, what else are you looking for? And a good relationship with food, like in a healthy position in that regard. What else are you looking for?
Yeah. So I recently had a client considering a contest prep, and he really kind of wanted to get into it. And I just kind of asked him, what's the next kind of year of your life look like as when you're entering a contest prep phase, especially if you still have like a diet before a diet to come and you consider the recovery phase after it. It's like you're probably giving up a full year of, or you're dedicating pretty much a full year of your life to this. And when talking that out with him, it's like, okay, we have a newborn child coming up in 3 months here. And it's like, is it going to be the best to be digging for a prep when you're low on sleep and you're managing all that sort of thing? So that was one red flag. And also asking him about, okay, in previous fat loss phases that you've done, have you noticed that impacts kind of your family or anything like that? And another red flag that popped up was like, yeah, he kind of definitely heard from his significant other that it impacted their relationship and it kind of hurt things a little bit. And they definitely kind of had a back and forth about his significant other not wanting him to kind of enter a really long dedicated prep at this time. And there's already some tension there. So it's like, hey man, I know this is your goal, but the stage is always going to be there. And if it means that we do this in like 2 or 3 years when you're not under all this stress and maybe you've improved your ability to go through fat loss phases without anybody else kind of really noticing and having that impact other people and gaining more experience with that, and also not having a newborn child coming up and different things like that. And there's also considerations of, we didn't have access to a gym, so we're kind of doing these body weight workouts and stuff like that. So that was kind of suboptimal. Now, I think that you can definitely maintain muscle mass going through a fat loss phase with body weight stuff and doing things at home. But, would a more ideal situation maybe be in a couple of years, assuming that all goes well and we're not still dealing with COVID in a couple of years, but kind of having a gym and just being in a better situation there. I just think that everything would go better there. So I think that not only having the requisite muscle mass, having a solid relationship with food, but also really considering what the next year of your life looks like and understanding that there's going to be points in your prep to where even just kind of moving around and loading weights onto the bar is going to feel kind of exhausting, and you're going to have points where you're very irritable with people and stuff like that. So really considering what life looks like over the next entire year and whether you're willing to push through those points throughout that year and how it impacts other people in your life and kind of what your previous experience has been with that, I think are all important things to consider as well.
Absolutely. I think that's so well said. It just made me laugh when you said, like, at points of prep, you're going to be like irritable. And I can remember in my first prep, and this was by no means the best prep that I've had. Like, my second prep was much better. And I don't think I was as bad, hopefully. But I can remember a time where, because I was working as a one-on-one PT at the time, and some of the people I work with after the prep, when I was eating more, they were like, "Oh, Steve, you're really nice. I didn't think you liked me. Like a few months ago, I thought you hated me or something." I was like, "No, you're right. I had no issues with you." So I was obviously like, the amount that it can impact your mood at particular times, especially if you maybe aren't using kind of refeeds, and I wasn't using kind of a lot of the tools that we have now to kind of keep you in the best state of mind. And I had a lot of weight to lose. One of the ones, in addition to what you guys said, which I think are amazing, one of the ones I see commonly is people coming to me wanting to compete in like a much shorter time frame than I have if I was to plan it out. So they think maybe like 10, 15 weeks, and I'm looking like, right, we need to do like a 20-week diet, maintain for 5 weeks, and then go into like another 20-week phase. And they're like, wow, that's going to be a long time. Like, well, if you actually want to be competitive on stage, similar to actually having muscle mass, like, we need to maintain as much of that mass as possible. And so you're not an asshole at the end, and we're not kind of rushing off body fat, all of these sort of things, or not at least. You're still probably going to be a bit of an asshole, but less of one at least, for a shorter period of time. We're going to need that time. And so, like, quite often I found myself there looking at like this year, and then we've had the discussion of like, maybe next year is going to be better for me. And then it just works out better that way. And when people do that, it's awesome, because like you said, Jess, then you get to take them in their off season, you get them through like a mini cut or something, and then you can set them up for their prep. And it's like, wow, now we know each other. Now I know how your body responds better. Things are just going to, the run's going to be much smoother. One thing I'm interested, Jess, when you talk to people, do you often ask their kind of reason why? Because I know that's a big thing that like people hear about, and they're probably like, yeah, what, like, you ask the why, right? What do you get, like a typical, do you often find people have thought about it? What do you find when that happens?
That's what I was about to mention next, because I remember when I had my first consultation with you, like nearly 3 years ago, you asked me what were my goals, and I told you I wanted to compete, and you asked me why, and my answer was probably something dumb, like, I don't know, it looks cool. And then you told me, yeah, you're going to have to find a better reason to compete for me to get you to the
I'm glad
stage.
I did that.
Yes. I'm glad you did too. Asking your why is going to be a huge part of prep for me. I like taking people through prep, because that's usually what's gonna make the hard days a little bit better to go through, because you know why you're doing it and you're dedicated to that. So having like an intrinsic motivation. Most of the time people just want the challenge. They're just ready for like a challenge, and they know whenever they know exactly what it entails, and that it's going to be a long-term commitment, and that it's going to be rough. I think I want to take the challenge, and I want to see, like, I've been building for years. I want to see what's under, but I also want to be competitive. So it's a combination of like competitive people, competitive people. And I always tell them it's nice to want to be competitive, but you also have to have an intrinsic motivation, just not placing on stage, because it is so subjective how you're going to be placing that day, because you don't know who's going to show up. Maybe you're going to think that you look great and that you could win, and then you're going to be on stage next to people who look like 10 times better than you. Like, you never know. You can fail your peak week. You can, you never know. Usually it's the challenge. People want to challenge themselves, and they're ready mentally to take it to the next level. And I know that, that's my why too. Like, I want to see how I improved now that I'm doing better with dieting. And it's also being in control. It's something that I can control. I know I can give it my all. And if I fail, I know that it's literally just up to me. and I'm okay with it. But that's also why I will never like go over my calories or anything, because I'm very, very goal driven. But yeah, the challenge is usually the main reason for people to go through prep.
I think that's normally the answer I get as well. And I think that's a fine answer. Like they just want to kind of, I don't know if this is the right way to put it, but well, actually it's funny, a few things. One person, I was just on a podcast and they asked, are you excited to get like the judges' feedback on your physique this next year? And I was like, I've never thought about that. And actually, I actually couldn't care less what they think. Like I care in the sense of like, I'd like to place and I'd like to do well. So I do kind of care. But I do this for myself. I compete because I want to see what I look like on stage and that I've improved on previous years. So it's really funny that you've kind of said that yourself there as well. I don't know where I was going with the other part. So
Okay.
I blanked on that one.
You cannot blame prep brain yet.
No, I've got a headache. I'm going to blame it on that.
Yes,
I don't know if you have any more comments on this particular topic. Otherwise, I can draw up the Instagram suggestions, as I know there was a few over there.
Just one thing, yes. Make sure you are financially stable. Most people like don't think about that. Prepping is extremely expensive, especially as a female. Yeah, because you're gonna have to pay for your hair and makeup and a bikini, which come expensive. You have to pay for registration. You have to pay for coaching, obviously, on top of everything. You have to pay for what else? Tan. Yeah, but it does get expensive, and most people don't think about that. But prep gets expensive, and even
accommodation.
Food,
that stuff as well. Yeah.
Traveling to the places, and food, like dieting food are just like, it's just more expensive than just regular food. And the deeper you get into prep, the more you're going to need like all the shirataki noodles and all those things, and they're not cheap. So yeah, all the dieting food is usually pretty more expensive.
Lots of monsters.
Very considerable.
Sugar-free monsters.
Yep.
So where was I going? Yeah, I actually, it's a really good point, because even for the males, although I was shocked like how much a bikini can cost, is like, I can see why everyone gets them like secondhand and stuff, because they're hundreds of pounds. Like it's crazy. And it's the most expensive pair of underwear I bought was like the 30 quid like trunks that I picked up. So yeah, it's for us, for men, it's much less expensive. And then you have like hair and makeup, you can get that professionally done. It's actually crazy. It can all really, really add up. So that's a very good point, because some people, like, they can just afford the coach, and then they're like, everything else, like, oh my God, like, can't I self-tan? And you're like, well, it's going to be much better if you get it professionally done. Like, yeah, it's a big stress. It can be a big stress. So yeah, anyway, let's get to, I thought this was quite a cool topic, and I'm going to throw it over to Ryan, and then we can kind of spitball. It was building credibility as a coach, growing social media presence, imposter syndrome, and self-doubt. I know that's a broad one, so I can, if you need a reminder of any of those, I can.
So I would say that probably one of the biggest things for building credibility on my end was probably getting associated with established and other credible individuals kind of in the space, to where for Revive Stronger is probably like, I don't know, how long ago do you think it was that I reached out to you? Probably like 4 or 5 years, probably.
That was a long time.
So I think that by kind of reaching out to you and kind of helping you out and having kind of your audience get more familiar with kind of my posts and different articles and stuff like that, I think that kind of helps start building credibility and that sort of thing there. I think that also, you could say through academia, you could build some credibility, whether it's a master's degree or a PhD or something like that. Now, it's definitely not an option for everybody to just go get their PhD in something. So kind of another thing with credibility is, so kind of teaming up with other people that you find credible and helping them write articles or whatever it might be, and kind of having them kind of sign off on your content. I think that can help. Also, I know that when I kind of had my own podcast and I would have kind of conversational style interviews, and like, if you're able to kind of ask thought-provoking questions and kind of have a conversation with those individuals about more kind of advanced topics, I think that you can kind of show that you know your stuff a little bit through kind of that platform as well. Regarding kind of like Instagram, I've totally fallen off the board on being consistent on Instagram. I don't think like Instagram is bad or anything like that. I just think that there's so many kind of infographics and people kind of posting that and doing a great job of that. Like, look at our team here posting great stuff. I just feel like I don't feel any kind of need in that space, with those. And I'm also not big on, posting physique shots and stuff like that. So I'm kind of at a loss at what to post over on there. But I think that consistently posting content on some sort of platform can definitely be helpful for building credibility, or else, people aren't really going to know kind of what you know, and that you know your stuff and that sort of thing as well. So I think those are some of my initial thoughts there. I kind of forget other areas of the question, or if you guys have anything to kind of follow up on, for sure.
I was just going to give you some credit, Ryan, because you do head up our Team Revive Stronger Instagram, which is very, like, you post every other day almost, or maybe more than that. I don't even know, because literally Ryan does the whole job over there. So whilst you don't face necessarily up content, you are creating content and putting it out through the brand. So I at least think I very much appreciate that, and we appreciate that as a team. And now hopefully the audience might think, oh, so that's all Ryan over there. Maybe they think it's me, or hopefully a lot of them do know it's you.
I don't know. I think most of them think it's you, because they'll ask me comments and questions like, "Hey Steve, what do you think about?" And it's usually like some totally random question, totally unrelated to the post. "Hey Steve, what do you think about this?" I'm just like, why don't you go reach out to Steve in his DMs or something like that? So
this is Ryan here. Ask me.
Yeah, exactly. No, but yeah, I think that posting that content on the Revive kind of channel is kind of like my way of producing content there, even if it is a little bit more behind the scenes. I actually kind of like that even a little bit more, to be kind of more behind the scenes. So yeah, that is definitely helpful as well.
I think being front facing, I'd be interested to hear what Jess feels about it, but there's pros and cons to it, because you get to, like for me, having the social media outreach and being able to communicate with people, it's just nice from a kind of social aspect. I enjoy that, but it also has its own stresses, because I don't know, you have to present yourself, you have to, the form videos have to look decent, and then you get people with conflicting thoughts like, oh, you should do it at this degree or this supination of your hand, whatever it is. And I'm just like, oh god, sometimes it can be stressful and there can be arguments, and it has its own anxiety. So it's interesting to hear your perspective, that you actually like just being behind the scenes, which I can completely understand too. What about yourself, Jess, in terms of building credibility as a coach, growing social media presence?
So growing social media presence for me was never the goal. Maybe it's been the goal for the past 6 months or so, since I've been full time with you guys, and that I really wanted to up my game and interact more with people. And there's also a business aspect of social media is huge. You need to create content that attract people that are gonna resonate with what you're saying, and you potentially can get them on board with coaching. It's not the main purpose for me. The main purpose for me is to try to display what I think is important right now in the fitness industry. Things like, emphasizing off seasons for even females, and having them be okay being a little bit thicker, and that you need that to grow, and all the body image positivity. That I think, growing social media hasn't never been the goal for me. So I'm not really an expert on that. And I'm very thankful that you share my posts, and I get a lot of engagement from that. But yeah, I try to stay true to myself and only speak about what I know. Sometimes I'll put myself in some uncomfortable position sharing things, because I know not everybody's going to agree with that, or that I'm going to get some arguments from it. But I think it's making me grow as well. So it's not it's not a net negative thing. Definitely not. But it's definitely uncomfortable sometimes. As for building credibility, I have been very fortunate to do my mentorship in person at JPS in Melbourne, in Australia, 2 years ago, to get my PT certification, because I have no formal education. I've never been to college or uni. So I had to start from from like nothing pretty much. All the experience that I've had previously to that was just working with you, which is to this day probably the biggest growth factor for me. It's still getting coached by you. I learned so much to help myself coach my own clients through that. But yeah, I've had the chance to do my mentorship in person at JPS, and they were the best. I cannot recommend them enough. I've had a beautiful experience there. We've had like in-person classes every other week. We could shadow people in the gym. So I've had some like real life experience with real clients. And then it was easier to transition online and actually feel comfortable with my own clients. But I think having done the internship with you guys too, having like a lower rate and people knowing that I was just an intern and getting shadowed by you really helped as well. And it's still not perfect. I get some days where I'm like, oh, this is tricky. I feel like I can't do that. And I have to remind myself like, hey, you've been doing that for a year now. You're capable of doing that. So it's a lot of positive self-talk, but just reminding yourself that you're capable. And if you're there and your clients are happy, like you must be doing something right. And probably also constant education, never stop learning, like reading research reviews and watching like educational content, presentations. There's so much like free stuff or like stuff on like member sites, like our member site, RP Plus, that really, really helps if you don't have any formal education. And reading textbooks, honestly, if there's anything I learned from JPS, it's like once you know, like, for example, most people talk about like hypertrophy, but most people don't know how muscle contract. Most people don't know the physiology of that, which is kind of a shame because you're like, this is just the base. And I remember Lyndon at JPS saying something like physiology over principles over something else, but it was just mainly like you can learn a lot from textbooks. You don't have to go to uni, but just buy a textbook about like physiology, anatomy, and you can go a long way with that. So yeah, constant education is definitely a big factor here, I think, to not get too big of an imposter syndrome, and also staying up to date, because we are, after all, evidence-based, and science is always improving, and it's always showing new things. So if you're not up to date with what's actually current, like you're kind of falling behind, I think. And that's the problem here in France, for example, where most coaches are like doing it the old school way, like programming like 4 sets of 10 for like each body part and everything. And when you challenge them to think otherwise, they just don't want to do that because that's how they learned. But they learned like with textbooks or like courses that are like 30 years old. Nothing is up to date anymore, which is kind of a shame. So yeah, anyway, all this ramble to say constant education.
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
I guess and that's part of the social media presence, is sharing that updated knowledge. In terms of, I just think of a pure example of Ryan does the big three. And it's a case of like, you often talk about mass in there or other research reviews, because Ryan keeps up to date and we as a team keep up to date with the latest evidence that's coming out. And obviously the podcast is part of that. I'm talking to people about, like, I just talked to Brad Schoenfeld about his recent meta-analysis on like training to failure. It's like awesome that I get to do that with him. But also, as like, for me as a podcast host, I have to not only keep my finger, I found, unfortunately, I have to keep my finger on social media. So I probably know far too many people on social media that like Ryan or Mike or Pascal are like, who the fuck is that? Jess, you probably know who they are if I was to bring them up, because you have to for like this stuff. And it's weird because now social media, there's evidence-based practitioners having debates online on social media, and that's where the P-ratio podcast came from. So it's crazy. And then obviously all the research reviews and everything. So I would say, in addition to what you guys said, in terms of formal education, I think you both have more formal education than me. Well, you do. I'm like, no doubt about that. Education, like for Ryan, you have a master's in
exercise science. Yeah.
Exercise science. Yeah, I was going to say the wrong one. So master, like Ryan is an exercise science master's, and Jess, you'll have the mentorship from JPS. I have like a level 3 PT qualification. That's like the the top of my education in the specific area that we're doing. I have a degree as well, but it's completely non-specific. So it's just interesting because like people, I think education for sure is huge, but now we have all the textbooks. Like when I was starting up, the textbooks were super non-specific, but now Brad Schoenfeld has a hypertrophy specific textbook, or RP have like hypertrophy ebook, like it's all specific. So it's like the education shouldn't be an issue for people in terms of like that element. And I would only say, in addition to what you guys said for credibility, I think what helped me get my foot in the door initially was being on social media and then competing. I think actually what a lot of people use competing as like their only thing. It's like, this gives me credibility. I got shredded and now I can help everyone get shredded. And now everyone's an online coach. So it's unfortunate, but that definitely gave me some credibility. I think that's part of the reason I still want to compete now, is because I know I need to keep my kind of, I want to go through the process. So I remind myself of everything that happens there. And I do it for selfish reasons too, but also for business reasons, because people expect me to step on stage and they want a coach who's probably stepping on stage, or at least part of a team that's stepping on stage and things like this. So very interesting. I think the second part of that was imposter syndrome and self-doubt. So I'm going to throw it at Ryan first. Have you experienced those things?
So one thing before I touch on there is on the credibility aspect. And I totally forgot to mention, but whether we like it or not, as kind of physique and fitness coaches, how we look matters to our clients and people that are kind of coming to see our stuff. And I don't think that means that you necessarily need to look like Steve Hall a year round, but I think that at least at some point in your life, to have at least kind of transformed your own physique to some degree and gotten good results for yourself, or with your other clients, can really help build that credibility, and sharing kind of your client's success and stuff like that. And also having a little bit of your own transformation, at least at some point. I'm not saying you need to stay like lean year round or anything like that. I sure as hell don't, but something like that as well can definitely help credibility. Now, kind of flipping over to the kind of imposter syndrome side, for fitness and stuff like that, when I started coaching, I felt like I was already at a good spot to where I had a good understanding of things. I think I was kind of later on in my degree. And if I'm being honest, most of the stuff I learned was really through podcasts and educating myself anyways. So I felt pretty comfortable when I started coaching. So I didn't feel a ton of kind of imposter syndrome and stuff like that. Now, I would say that in kind of other areas, whether it's kind of computer programming or stuff like that, I definitely have felt it. And I think that, in those situations, you just have to trust yourself that no matter what happens, that you can figure it out, and that, you have the ability to problem solve, and just have a little bit of confidence in yourself that you're going to be okay regardless what happens. And, I definitely like to think about, what's the worst case scenario if kind of these ideas in my head come true, that probably won't come true because you just think stuff up in your head and that sort of thing, to where it's usually never as bad as we kind of think it is. And I think that anything is kind of figure outable and you can find a way through it. And, I think a little bit of imposter syndrome is probably like healthy, to where we don't want to be kind of arrogant and just ignorant to what we don't know, and to head into every situation like we know everything and stuff like that. And having a little bit of hesitation there is probably a good sign that we're pushing ourselves and challenging ourselves. But I think that also having the confidence that, hey, I can figure this shit out and do a good job is also really important.
Very well said. The only thing I just wanted to quickly add to credibility, I think this is something you probably all will agree with. And I remembered it because I was like, this is super important. Like Jess said, your clients need to be happy. And if you're getting results, your clients are happy. Like if I see a coach doing that, they have happy clients getting results. Like I know that's a good coach. Doesn't matter what their methods, principles are. If clients are not going to be happy, and if they're not getting results, like you're not a good coach. Doesn't matter how smart you are. So I just wanted to say, like, transformations, testimonials, like people talking good stuff about you, that builds a lot. But very well said there, Ryan. That's interesting. I think Jess will have a different take potentially on kind of imposter syndrome. Is that something you still feel if you have felt it?
Yeah.
Or are you just
definitely. Especially at the beginning, when I had my first 2 clients, it took me like a day of like mental struggle to build a program, because I was like, what if I'm doing that wrong? What if I'm putting too much volume? What if it's too little volume? What if they don't understand what I'm doing? Or like, yeah, it was massive. But I think it went away slowly over time, having more clients and working with more different people, different background, different people overall, and getting more experience. I think that's something like imposter syndrome. At first, you're just gonna get it, like that's normal, because everything is gonna take you forever to do. And now I look like I have like maybe double the clients that I've had last year, and it takes me half the time to do the same thing. So it's definitely a matter of getting more experienced at what you're doing. But I still feel it sometimes, but yeah, it's a matter of not getting into my own head and be like, hey, you're capable of doing that. You've done it before. And if you don't know, you can ask for help. You can look for the answer. And I'm always very straightforward with them. Sometimes they ask me a question about, hey, is this supplement really worth it? What do you think about that? And I'll be like, I actually don't know, but I'm going to go look for the answer. And it's always great experience to go actually look for the answer, because once I do that, the answer is in my head forever. I know I'm always going to remember it as long as people ask and be like, yeah, I know that because I've done the research before. But yeah, never be afraid to just not knowing like the answer to the question, because they're not going to judge you if you actually go look for the answer. And that's something I was very scared of before, being like, what if they ask me a question and I don't know the answer? And I'm like, well, you can actually just go look for it.
I think that the experience, and then having clients who are educated, like, because they're coming to us because we're evidence-based, clearly know stuff, so they want to ask questions. Mm-hmm. And they're great clients because they test you big time. Yeah. And they can be nerve-wracking, but the more experience you get with that sort of person, mm-hmm. that you answer things where you're like, oh, like I actually have a good reason for this. This is awesome. So I think that's great. And I still get it. It's funny with clients because I think I have my third person who has a PhD, and I might have worked with more people than that who has PhDs. And I'm just like, whenever someone is like a PhD, like I'm working with someone, and I worked with, for example, I think I've said this before, with Gabrielle Fondero for a time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, when I was working with her, initially I was like, oh God, do I really want to coach her? She's so clever. I'm just going to think I'm an idiot. But this is where like education isn't what makes a coach. Like you can, mm-hmm. and I've worked with people more intelligent than me, but I've got, and you will have your own experience and a set of tools, and your ability to be a coach isn't just your education there. So yeah, the experience, exposure therapy, big time, like that just helps so much. Like same with social media. Like you think about talking in front of a camera or being here on the podcast. I was just saying to Jess beforehand, I still like get nervous for some podcasts, but others I don't. But at the start, I was like just always nervous. Whereas now it's much easier for me. I'm just better at being able to do that. So I think over time, you just get much less stress about these things. And the only other thing I'd say is what's helped me is just kind of talking about and posting about things I know or know quite well. You talked about that before, Jess, but I think you can sometimes land yourself in the shit and you really get nervous and you have imposter syndrome. People call you out when you start talking about something you really don't know. So like, I don't know, if you talk about gut health and then Gabby posts a comment on your thing like, I don't think this is right. And you're like, oh my God, I don't know anything. It's like, don't post about gut health then. Like talk about stuff you know about. So yeah, really good points there. I don't think I really have anything else.
Just one addition to that, I think that part of the reason where maybe I didn't feel as much of that imposter syndrome when I started coaching is because before that, before I really started picking up a lot more clients and stuff, I regularly did my own podcasts and my own YouTube videos and answering questions and kind of doing Q&A style things like that, to where it's almost like those years of experience kind of creating my own videos, answering those questions it was kind of indirectly kind of coaching people that were asking me questions online and stuff like that. So I had already heard so many different questions that people might have, to where now when I started coaching clients, it was like, okay, I've kind of heard this before. I've answered it. I kind of already know how I kind of like to explain this. And it was just kind of much easier to kind of get in the swing of things there. So producing your own content as a coach can also be a way to just kind of get practice of organizing your thoughts around certain concepts so you can explain them to clients and different things like that.
Really well said. And I don't think it's anything that will ever go for people in that Like there's always going to be someone smarter than you or more muscular than you. And I get it. Like I'm not a natural pro. I don't even know if I'll ever be a natural pro. I haven't got a PhD. I'm probably never going to have a PhD. So it's kind of just being confident in what you do know. And I think recently me and Pascal have been talking about it, like our role is not so much like educators, because there's people doing a fantastic job of that. It's like we are just great coaches, and that is our wheelhouse. So I think, yeah, like knowing yourself and know what you know. I don't know if we have time to really go to, I don't know if we have like a quick fire question round or something. I'll see if there's any like quick ones. So we're basically up to the hour. Any of these quick fire. Let's see if this, okay, how to give value to my coaching clients. So how do you guys give value to your coaching clients? Jess? Sorry, it might be a horrible question.
I'm just trying to figure out what the question means. I don't understand the question.
When I think about it, I'm like, it's basically your check-ins. This is where I'm thinking we give value. Mostly during your check-ins, answering their questions, helping them move towards their goals. Then I'm thinking like the podcast is part of us. Like that's part of the value that we give to our clients. I think a lot of our clients listen to the podcast through social media. So the content we put out is all towards and directed towards our clients. Yeah. And then where else? Like if you're on other podcasts, of course, that can be ways of giving value back. I had one other one in my head, but I've forgotten what it is. So any others?
I would just say that, one of the biggest thing is helping my client move towards where they want to go with their kind of goals and stuff like that, helping them progress towards their goals. And a lot of that is usually kind of helping them stay out of their own way to where they're trying to tinker with things too much. And they're like, oh, I need to go into a mini cut here and go into a gaining phase here. And they're trying to just constantly go within these phases. And it's like, hey, I think that we just need a consistent kind of directed adaptation of a consistent calorie surplus for X amount of months and really trying to extend this gaining phase, not jumping in and out of kind of dieting on off days or different things like that, to where we're just kind of going up and down too much, preventing them from getting in their own way and helping them get their results, I think is where I kind of tend to add the most kind of value there. And then just answering their questions and helping them on the education piece side of things as well. And a lot of clients I've had are also at least interested in doing some coaching and stuff like that, and kind of so they can see kind of behind the curtain of how kind of quality coaching is done. I think that's also provides a lot of value to a lot of clients.
Yeah, I was thinking also reminding them that they're humans and just giving them a bit of love, because sometimes they think they're robots and they just follow your guidelines, but they don't really understand what's going on behind. And I have to remember them like, hey, maybe you've had a shit week, maybe something happened, maybe you overate, but you're human, it's going to happen. Life is difficult. It's not fun. It's not easy every day, but you're doing a great job. It's just like giving them this little positive boost that sometimes they need, because they're often, and I find that with female clients, especially, very, very hard on themselves when they don't achieve their goals. So yeah, giving them a bit of love here and there can work. And also maybe developing some self-efficacy, some autonomy throughout their training and their nutrition, so they can actually be okay on their own if I'm like not able to like answer the question like in the minute. And yeah, just, like I've had some clients for like a year now, and the first week of the program, instead of just telling them like, hey, you have to do 2 sets of these, 2 sets of this, I'll be like, hey, just write down, like, I'm just going to write down 2 to 3. And if after 2 sets, you feel like you haven't gotten like a great pump, you are not like feeling it, like you can always add a set. So it's just like maybe developing some self-efficacy in when it comes to the training and nutrition side of things.
Yeah, I think particularly once you've been this is why I love working with people for longer time scales. It's great to work with someone for any time, I think, but I just had one of my clients, he's been with me for 3 years and he's dropping off at the end of this month. And I was like, but I was just so grateful for having such amount of time to be able to work with him, because you can do these things where it's like, I know you so well, I trust you to be able to like take on board this thing. And then you can almost get them running the show themselves. So then they don't need you anymore, which is kind of the ideal position to be in. But I love that, Jess, because it might just be my style of coaching, but it's the way I've always enjoyed it, is building my clients up. I don't ever if they've done something wrong, it's a case of acknowledging that, don't ignore it, but I always want to leave them with a positive note. I want them leaving my check-in being awesome, I'm going to take on this week and do my best job, because I'd hate ever for one of them to watch a check-in from me and be like, fuck this, fuck life, and just give up. I want them leaving it energized and to do a better job or can be consistent with what they're doing. So I really love that, Jess. Don't know if you've got anything more, Ryan, or we can wrap up.
I don't think so. I think
cool.
I've got to said my piece. So yeah.
Awesome. As always, guys, it's always great chatting to you both. If people want to reach out to you, if they just want to do a social media chat, Ryan, are they best reaching out to the Team Revive account?
Either that or my own, either one. I'll check them both. Or you could email me at ryan@revivestronger.com. I would actually probably prefer that, so I don't have to type with my thumbs. That is the worst, but yeah, that would work.
You can do Instagram on your desktop.
Yeah, on your browser.
I should actually do that, honestly. But
WhatsApp was a game changer for me. When I found out you could do WhatsApp on your computer, I was like, whoa, this is so much better. So awesome. Jess, where for you?
Instagram, always, Jess Dalglish. That's the main thing. I usually answer pretty quickly because I'm always on there.
It's like me. Awesome. Guys, thank you so much again. Thank you to everyone for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Bye.
So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Flor. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people, but each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge. And I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.